Welcome to Forward Progress on this Monday, October 9th, post week 5. We've got an action-packed show. We'll be breaking down some takeaways of the week that was. Look forward to this week's lines and early market moves, as well as impactful injuries we'll be keeping our eyes on, as well as previewing the Monday Night Football game. If you're not already, you should really subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of the content. Also, smash the like button. Boost us up in the algorithm. Of course, none of this will be possible without our sponsor, Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what the pros have known for the last 25 years. Competitive odds, your trusted sports book. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle. With that being said, I'm your host, George Sofidis, and I'm excited to get this show on the road. I'm joined every Monday, of course, by Suma, pro sports bettor, creator on the Hammer Betting Network, and Cleve TA plus EV better, cleveanalytics.com. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. I want to start off right away with the Sunday Night Football game. Unless you bet on the Cowboys, it was quite a result for anybody watching yesterday. The Niners beat them up 42-10. Cleve, I want to start with you. Last week, I asked you after Buffalo had won against Miami in impressive fashion if you were ready to make them the number one power rated team above KC. Well, I'm going to ask you again, but this time with San Francisco. Are you ready to call them the best team in football, or are you still holding out that Kansas City's the best?
No, you have to give it to the Niners at this point. Everything they've done, everybody in front of every challenge they've beaten and demolished, and the fact that their only loss in the last since Purdy's taken over was the NFC Championship game when he got hurt early in that game. It's like they haven't lost to anybody yet with him under center, so you can't really do anything other than crown them right now as the best team in the NFL. And we're already seeing in this game coming up against the Browns, and there's other factors involved, but they've gone from, I think they were 2.5 before this week, and they flew all the way through the 3 to 4.5, 5. It's right now. So they're getting all the love in the market, and deservedly so.
All right, Suma, I ask you the same question. Are the Niners the best team? And also, everyone's trying to figure out if Brock Purdy is a product of the system or if he's just that damn good. I want your answer to both those questions.
Getting some tour discussion vibes from like week 2 or something. So I think right now the title belongs to the 49ers. Chiefs, they will figure things out on offense. I mean, when you look at true efficiency numbers, the Chiefs are up there at the top. It just feels a little bit harder for them right now. They are still figuring out who's wide receiver, the go-to guy on like certain key downs and stuff like that. But I think the Chiefs will be fine right now. I think top to bottom, 49ers probably the best team in the league. Brock Purdy, I think he's evolving. So I think what we sometimes miss or forget is that two things can be true. A, he's working very well within the scheme and within the confines of the offense. And B, he's also evolving as a player. And sometimes we are very fast to, okay, Brock Purdy is the gift of playing in the Shanahan system with so many great playmakers, but he's also really evolving in terms of making crucial plays with anticipation down the field and making big plays. And I think we are really starting to see the difference between him and Jimmy Garoppolo, where he really is capable of making more throws down the field and showing off more athletic ability than Jimmy G. I think perfect example was the sequence in early in the third quarter, which in my opinion broke the Cowboys yesterday. And he was completing a big play down the field to Brandon Ayuk, I think for like 35 yards or something. And the refs called a holding on San Francisco, and now everything was erased, and they had to start again at, I think, 3rd and 15. And he just casually drops a bomb to Deebo Samuel. I think it was a dig or a in route, just casually over a linebacker in the middle of the field. Boom, first down, and they scored a touchdown on the drive. I think that these are the kind of plays where you can really see how Brock Purdy in his second year, still a small sample size, really evolving and is probably making a little bit of ground towards that label of just being a product of the offense.
Well, I'll tell you, if they do what they did last week to Cleveland defense this week, the discourse is going to be out of control next week. Cleve, I want to ask you about Dallas. We often talked about the big three in the NFC being San Fran, Philly, and Dallas. Do you think Dallas still deserves to be in that conversation, or are they a step behind San Fran and Philly?
Yeah, I mean, they're a step behind San Fran, that's for sure. I think they can compete with Philly. We'll see. But, it's one of those things where the San Fran's just on a different level right now. And look, they had a night game, it was at home. They had all the, everything kind of go their way. So not that I would favor Dallas over San Fran, even if it was in Dallas. But, I still think that they are a notch below, but, they're in that grouping and maybe the bottom of that grouping. But I still think they're ahead of Detroit. They're ahead of Seattle. Like I think people are saying that they're in that tier. I'm not sure I agree. I would take Dallas on a neutral, laying points over all those teams. So, it's the big three, and it's just kind of Dallas with a small dot at the bottom of the three, in my opinion.
All right, let's go to Bills and Jags. Game started off in London. Cleve, I want to start with you.
Yeah.
Matt Milano goes down, and you've often talked about in the past how important he is to this Buffalo defense. Well, how impactful is that injury for them?
Yeah, it's a big deal. He does a great job covering the middle of the field, covering tight ends and running backs. They are consistently at the top of the league in terms of closing down the middle of the field. I mean, right now, heading into last week, they were third, had the third best defense in terms of EPA allowed over the middle of the field, which is what that's his kind of strong suit. So it's a big deal. I mean, when you've got, guys like Travis Kelce, et cetera, who are playing tight end and that Buffalo's going to have to face here, that's going to matter. And he's the captain of that defense. And guys like, Poyer and Hyde are getting a little older, and, White is out. Like he was the key after that front four. So it's going to be a big loss. And, I'm not sure who's going to, be able to replace him, but that's clearly going to be an issue for this team. And it wasn't even just Milano yesterday. I mean, they lost a ton of guys. And so, it's going to be interesting to see they come back home without a bye. They're huge favorites over the Giants, 2 touchdown favorites. And so, that's interesting. I want to see how they respond to that loss and to the, having to travel overseas, and then also, what they're going to do, past that pass rush, because they've got problems between the secondary and not having Milano from a coverage perspective.
I wonder if, they're very deep at safety because they went and signed Taylor Rapp with the idea that Poyer wouldn't be back. And then when they saw the market wasn't, high price for safeties, they brought back Poyer. I wonder if Poyer, who looks like he might be losing a step, maybe steps up as a linebacker and you get Taylor Rapp on the field in place of him. Suma, how good are the Jags? Are you impressed that they beat the Bills? They look like the better team for most of the game. What's your level of optimism on how good this Jags team is?
I'm still very optimistic on that offense. I think at least over the first 4 weeks, it was really to be seen that Trevor Lawrence played really, really good, but it was like receiver error, bad fumbles, blocked field goals, like drops in key situations. Calvin Ridley had like 2 or 3 crazy drops against the Texans early on, and they really got into a bad game script against Houston just based on those on all those errors. Ridley also had I think end zone drop against the Chiefs the week before. So I think that early on, those were all errors that will itself like clean up over the course of the season. I don't expect Kevin Ridley to keep dropping crucial third downs and touchdowns and whatever. They also were not very healthy early on. They got Cam Robinson back. He might play through an elbow dislocation, I guess. Zay Jones remains to be seen, but I think it was all like crazy, weird, noisy errors that led to them like very underperforming in terms of efficiency. And I think Lawrence has shown that he's completely fine. And going forward, I expect them to be pretty good. on offense. Defense, pass defense, kind of shaky, even though we didn't really see that in London. I think that their run defense is generally better, but I think their pass defense still lacks some decent pass rush outside of Josh Allen and some holes in the secondary.
The Jags are a very good offense until they get in the red zone. And up until this game, they were like the second worst at converting red zone appearances into touchdowns. If they can change just that one thing alone, they're going to be a lot better off. Cleve, you ended up being on the Jags yesterday. I wanted to ask you, because this was the first time we've ever seen a London team stay an extra week and play 2 games in a row. And the Bills chose to fly in 2 days before. But this spot, if it comes up again in the future, which I'm almost certain it will, do we need to start treating it like a real home field advantage, like a significant one, just off not having to travel to London at all?
I mean, simple answer is yes, because you asked me the same question last week on the show. You asked me, how I'm going to adjust based on this situation, and I said, I just wasn't sure because it's never happened before. We have nothing to compare it to. And so how do you, what number do you use as from an adjustment? You're just making stuff up out of thin air. And so I said, maybe I'll adjust a little bit, but I just didn't have a real feel of it yet. And then just the more I thought about it, and just what I did was I ended up being on the Jags. It was my biggest bet of the week. And it was Jags +6. When I saw it hit 6, it was an automatic buy for me. And then I also took money line. And the way I looked at it was, okay, what if there was no London here? If this is just neutral field, they're playing in America, normal rest, what is this line? And I personally would have made it 6. So I said, well, okay, so we're sitting here. There is no adjustment for this potential that is going to be a huge negative for Buffalo and a huge advantage for Jacksonville, in my opinion. Obviously we had the Tre'Davious White injury too. You had Buffalo coming off a big win against Miami. You have all those things. Even if none of that, comes to fruition, I still thought it was a fair line. But if it was going to be a negative, if it did in fact impact Buffalo and was an advantage to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we've got a huge plus EV opportunity here. And from a kind of a looking at the kind of the long tail outcome, Jags could win. Jags money line is more valuable than you would get as a 6-point or 5.5-point underdog in any other situation, because we don't have a scenario like this typically. So that's what I was banking on, was just, I thought the line was pretty fair, even without those factors. And then if there was any sort of condition issues, then, Jags have a huge advantage. And we saw that. I mean, there was nobody who could watch that game. I don't care what you thought about going into the game. Nobody watched that first half thinking that wasn't an impact. I mean, the Bills were they were absolutely sleepwalking through the first half. The Jags were way more refreshed. So I don't know. You could call it circumstantial evidence, but I think anyone who watched that, would say that there was a clear impact. And it just makes sense. You're in your body. If you're Jacksonville, you're already adjusted to the time clock. You are used to playing, in that atmosphere, going up against a team that is coming in really late in the week and adjusting on the fly. It has to be an advantage. And so I think there's definitely going to be an adjustment the next time this happens. And it's just a matter of how much.
All right, let's go on to a game, the Bengals and Cardinals. Joe Burrow got his swagger back. It looked like he threw some deep balls. He had some zip on the ball. He was even scrambling around, which we hadn't seen since the calf injury. Suma, are you ready to proclaim that Joe Burrow is back, or are you still waiting a little bit more?
I think we kind of have to, because there was not a lot in this game where we would think, okay, he's still only at 80%. I mean, they even used a little bit of under center play action, when I remember correctly. And that was something that was just not there early in the season. They had 3 snaps from under center in 4 weeks or something. So just based on the evidence that we saw on the field, we probably have to assume that he's somewhat close to 100%. At least we didn't really see any major limitations yesterday.
Cleve, I just want to quickly ask you about their defense as well. We often praise Lou Anarumo and how good this defense has played. I don't think it's looked very good this year. And do you think that's just been a byproduct of the offense can't sustain drives and the defense is tired? Or do you think there's actually some cracks in this defense?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I've always been I know you back the Bengals a lot. I've been the opposite. I just didn't see the talent on that defense to really believe in them. And he just coached them up. And it was just kind of one of those where there was no real star. I mean, Hendrickson is probably as close to a star as you would get on that defense, but the rest of it was just kind of a bunch of guys. And he did a nice job of, connecting them. They had very few injuries the last couple of years too. So it was a very cohesive unit. And they did a really nice job producing a top half of the NFL defense. And, they lose Jesse Bates, who was the kind of quarterback of that secondary. They lose some couple corners, and that's really affected things. And so they've been kind of an underwhelming defense. And, they played better yesterday, but again, Arizona, they played above their ski. I was on the Bengals yesterday, which if you know me, if I'm fading the Cardinals, I think it's a really good spot to do that. I just thought this wasn't a good matchup. And so I don't know. I don't think the Bengals are a top 20 level defense. I think against bad offenses and bad offensive lines, they can do well, but they still gave up 20 points. It wasn't like it was a complete, dominant performance, but I would put them in kind of that 20 range. And then real quick on the Burrow thing, I know you didn't ask me the question, but I can't say I would. Yeah, one of the reasons why I liked Cincinnati yesterday is because they're obviously their issue with Burrow being in shotgun a lot and kind of a statue was that their offensive, everyone knew that the pass was coming, and they were facing Myles Garrett in that defensive line. You had the Tennessee line with Jeffrey Simmons, et cetera. You had Aaron Donald and company. They faced some really tough defenses that can push the pocket, right? Guys that can really get in his face without blitzing, et cetera. And so you just didn't have that with Arizona. So I thought that he would have much more time and a much more of a clean pocket. I mean, he was only pressured yesterday, 10 out of 51 dropbacks. And so he had plenty of time to look back there. And Jonathan Gannon even admitted that they did a really bad job of scheming to take away Jamar Chase without T. Higgins there. I don't know. They should have doubled him more, to be honest. And they just didn't. They let the number one guy beat him. It was just a bad game plan all around. It was a bad matchup. I wouldn't declare Burrow back per se, but I think he's clearly getting more healthy.
Yeah. I think the line reflects it. They're still under a field goal this week against Seattle, so the market's not ready to take that limitation off. All right, you guys both want to talk about the Steelers-Ravens. I think we all lost money on the Ravens yesterday. Suma, let's start with the Ravens. What happened yesterday?
So this is one of those games where I will have a lot of nightmares in the upcoming days. So I mean, losing is tough to begin with, but losing in that fashion is always a really bitter taste, because I mean, if you watch that game, Ravens were clearly the better team. Lamar was cooking. 3 touchdown drops, 2 touchdown drops on back-to-back plays from Mark Andrews, and I think it was Rashad Bateman. Walk-in touchdown drop by Nelson Aguilar, a deep bomb dropped by Zay Flowers in the fourth quarter, where he beat the defense and was slipping. I think that Lamar Jackson really played close to a perfect game. Yes, the interception in the red zone was very stupid. I don't know that you have to throw a fade route to Odell Beckham in the corner of the end zone. Don't know if you have to do that, but still, he was playing some really, really good football. I think his PFF grade of 93.7 points today really reflects that. And the Ravens somehow just beat themselves. I mean, Steelers had no business being in this game. They had a passing success rate of 35%. That includes the last drive, which was the only, I think it was the touchdown drive, which was the only drive where the Steelers were really able to move the ball. Other than that, I mean, I think that game should have been over at 23-7 Ravens or something. I mean, really some crazy Mike Tomlin home dog voodoo magic. I don't know how he does it. I think Rob had a tweet yesterday saying he doesn't believe that the Steelers are actually practicing out there. They are just banking on some voodoo magic at Heinz Field. I mean, yeah, crazy stuff. I mean, Lamar Jackson really, I think, played a really, really, really good game, and the drops really hurt him. I think he lost 7 expected points simply on those drops. Crazy to think about.
I remember you tweeted out before the game yesterday. Anybody who tells you they're on the Steelers, they can't give you a reason other than historicals or Tomlin is good as a dog against division opponents. There was no handicap for current state of the rosters. Cleve, the Steelers are dead last in success rate this year. They're fourth last in offensive EPA per play. They're dead last in red zone appearances per game. They get to the red zone 1.4 times per game. The Steelers are 3-2. What the fuck is going on here?
You're asking the wrong guy. I guess I can't pick them right. I faded them against the Raiders, and they essentially dominated that game. And then I backed them against Houston, thinking that they could, really collapse the Houston banged up O-line, and they got destroyed. And then I faded them again yesterday, and there was, again, like, there's not much more that needs to be said. Anyone who watched that game, like, it was 10-3, and I couldn't believe that it wasn't like 24-3 because just the wasted opportunities, just all the screw ups. And then I thought, all right, fine. We finally get a break with that punt fumble. We're just going to score a touchdown, and that's going to do it. Like, we're going to cover this game and get away with it. And he throws an interception on third down. It was a horrible fade route. I just don't know how they keep doing it. And again, we talked about this before the show. It's one thing if, like, the Browns game where same situation where they couldn't produce any offense, but TJ Watt just dominated. TJ Watt and Highsmith just dominated the Browns O-line. They created turnovers, created pressure. Like, okay, that's the Steelers defense kind of doing it. This was just a case of Ravens dropping every open pass. And these were like big plays. These weren't like, 5-yard outs. We're talking like 3 or 4 deep passes, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, like just incredible amount of drops that you just would never see. And there's nothing that the Steelers did at all. So, that's what's really frustrating. It's not just a matter of turnover. I mean, turnovers are one thing. They said if they're created by the defense and created by pressure, these are wide open guys that just drop balls and it has nothing to do with anything Pittsburgh related. So the only thing it could be, the only way you can just, explain it is voodoo magic from Tomlin. There's nothing else about that game that you can explain. So I don't know. I don't know what maybe I'm just going to lay off all Pittsburgh games either way for the next month, give myself a break because 0-3 in those games, but like I'm hitting 65% thinking everything else. So Steelers are my kryptonite.
All right. Let's look forward and analyze some market moves and injuries. Some weeks there are less injuries than others. It felt like this week there was actually some impactful injuries to monitor. Let's start off with Ravens and Titans who are going to be playing in London. The Ravens are getting relatively healthy, but now they have, Ronnie Stanley's back, but now they have the other tackle issue. Morgan Moses didn't play. Patrick McCarry gets hurt in the game. The Titans are dealing with Treylon Burks' injury. He still hasn't played, and we still wait to see if Nicholas Petit-Frere will return. Suma, are you surprised by this line on a neutral, or do you think it's fair right now?
I'm not surprised. This smells like a classic 3.5 back and forth. People who like the Titans will happily take the 3.5, and Ravens bettors will try to get a -3. This at least seems to be the way right now. I'm not overly surprised. Titans are still not a bad team. They still have some voodoo on their side with Mike Vrabel. So yeah, I think that 3.5 kind of range was at least on my part to be expected.
They got torched on the ground. We hadn't seen that in a while. Zach Moss broke off a couple big runs. Cleve, do you think the Ravens will be able to utilize some of that as well?
Yeah, I don't know. Even their run game looked a little bit off. I mean, Justice Hill actually had some good runs, and then until he fumbled, so he was a little bit, squirmy in there. But they just don't have the same dominant run offense that they had in the past. And Lamar looks a little hesitant to run. Again, I know he signed that big contract, and so maybe he's trying to be more of a pocket guy. But it just felt like he didn't take off and just was a little bit, hesitant running out of the pocket more than usual. And they didn't do many design runs that I can remember yesterday either. In terms of the line, I mean, I have 3.5, so I think it's perfectly right on the number. The Titans are they just have no explosiveness. I mean, Treylon Burks was really the only guy who could get deep, and he's out. I don't know if he's going to play this week or not, but they are clearly missing that deep threat. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins felt like was being targeted on every throw yesterday, and rightfully so. There's nobody else that can do anything. So when you're so one-dimensional and you're just kind of pounding it with Henry, and the Spears does give them a little bit of explosiveness, out of the backfield. Maybe they can utilize him more in the pass game, but I don't know. This is kind of I think this number feels right, and I think that both defenses should be okay here. So I don't think there's really much either way from my perspective on this game.
All right, Suma, let's go to Vikings Bears. Obviously, the injury we're watching is Justin Jefferson, who's still getting MRIs on his hamstring, and we still need to learn more. The Bears lose a couple running backs during the game last week with Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, but maybe their secondary gets healthy. Eddie Jackson, Jalen Johnson remain to be seen. Kyler Gordon is technically eligible. I always ask which receiver is worth the most to the spread to his team, and whether it's Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson. Well, the markets are looking to fade Minnesota here. The line is at 3, but it looks like it could be heading under the number. It probably would have been closer to 3.5, 4 with him there. How important is Justin Jefferson to this Minnesota offense, or are the Bears so banged up you think they'll still be able to move the ball well?
Yes and yes. Problem is that it's looking to be some real ugly weather there in the Chicago area. That's why the under took a lot of money on Monday morning. So I checked the weather report, and it looks like overnight there's going to be like 20 to 25 miles per hour of wind and rain. I did not get the forecast in my app all of a sudden for Sunday. Maybe someone can check on that real quick. But I think the move to the under is weather related, and then on the same wave, I think the spread will be correlated because the Bears would have an advantage with their run game with Justin Fields if this turns into a game where you would rob the Vikings of their passing attack. If both teams have to primarily run the ball, I think the Bears should have some form of an advantage here. But if the weather is fine, I mean, Vikings should still get something going through the air. I think even without Jefferson against that Bears defense, they should be able to move the ball. But I think we have to wait and see on the weather reports.
Yeah, it looks like all the East Coast games potentially are going to have rain and winds. Jets, Buffalo, Cleveland, Chicago, all the East Coast games, Ohio, Cincinnati. Those are the ones to watch. Cleve, are you optimistic that Chicago has righted the ship offensively? I talked to Rob about during last week's game on Thursday that, against a good defense, maybe Chicago's offense wouldn't look good. But when they play bad defenses, it really allows Justin Fields to move around and create throwing lanes. Is this Vikings defense a good matchup for Justin Fields?
Is it a good matchup? They've actually been better than I thought they would be. They're kind of middle. They're like 20th in the EPA. But if you look at their schedule, I mean, look at who they faced. They faced the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Eagles. Like, they've had some really tough games that they've had, or tough opponents. And so I give them credit for at least kind of hanging in there. They held down Tampa. I mean, Tampa only scored like 20 points. I think Carolina only scored, they didn't even score a touchdown, just 2 field goals. So against the bad offenses, they've done a pretty decent job. So, I'll give them credit from that regard. Justin Fields is, he's okay against the blitz, I guess. He's not great at kind of reading the field and getting the ball out quick. And so that's obviously what you're going to need against this Brian Flores heavy blitz scheme. And so, I actually didn't check the numbers. I didn't watch enough of the game to have an idea, but I was curious how often he was going to blitz Patrick Mahomes yesterday, because, obviously Mahomes is the last guy you want to blitz a lot. And I had a feeling he would, dial it back. So I don't know if anybody has those numbers, but I'd be curious how he performed. And I think, this week it's going to be the opposite. No matter what, he's going to just, blitz the house against Fields. And I'm not sure I'm ready to declare Fields and this offense back. I mean, 2 weeks ago against the worst defense we've ever seen, he had a good game. And then, I was on the Bears on Thursday night. That was just a unique spot with the Commanders coming off of an overtime game on a short week. We knew that their legs would be really wobbly, and they just didn't seem, into it at all. So that was a little bit of an outlier performance. I think this line is interesting because if it's sitting at 3, I mean, 2 weeks ago we had Denver 3.5 close in Chicago. I mean, even without Justin Jefferson, I think Minnesota's a better team than Denver. So I'm interested. I mean, some of that has to be the weather. Kirk Cousins outdoors and in bad weather is probably not the ideal situation to back Minnesota. So I think that's part of it. But it's just interesting to compare the two and how much respect that Chicago's getting now. So I don't know. I think that there's reasons to look at both sides. But if it was a perfect weather day, I think Minnesota would be the clear. I don't know if Chicago would be taking all this money, but obviously that weather is a big deal here, and having a run heavy scheme with Justin Fields is more advantageous than having Kirk Cousins.
All right, let's look at a game that had some movement this morning. Colts and Jaguars. Looks like Anthony Richardson is going to be out perhaps for a month. They also had, their left tackle Bernard Raymond still was concussed and didn't play. Shaq Leonard, often injured, missed the game. So did Kwity Paye. I actually want to ask you, Suma, before we discuss the specific line. This is the second time Anthony Richardson didn't finish a game. He's already missed 1 out of 5 games. I know it's a small sample size, but this isn't promising for his play style. Is he going to have to, start watching Lamar film on how to avoid taking hits? Because if he keeps thinking he's going to bulldoze everybody, he might not last the season.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, psychologically, I think it has to be an issue at some point, because when he comes back, he had the concussion, he had the grade 3 AC joint sprain or whatever. I mean, at some point, it gotta matter psychologically, and you might be playing a little bit differently. Maybe they can protect him a little bit better scheme-wise. I don't think that would be the case, but I think he just has to learn to protect his body. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is doing some curses over the summer of how to roll when he gets sacked, and maybe that's some stuff that AR-15 can also use. But yeah, in general, I think at some point you gotta work out how it's mentally bothering you, because that concussion and that AC joint sprain will be in your head when he comes back on the field.
Jags are not without their injuries. Devin Lloyd still hasn't played, didn't play last week. They also lost guard Walker Little and Zay Jones in the game. Cleve, we talked about how great the spot was for Jacksonville staying in London for the extra week against the Bills. Well, they've got a body clock that's adjusted to London time now for 2 weeks. Is this a negative advantage coming back and having to get back into the swing of things? Are we going to see the downside of 2 weeks in a row at London play out this week?
Yeah, we're about to find out, and I think the line reflects that. And I was, texting some buddies, during the Jags game, because we're all on Jacksonville, and someone said, "Well, wow, they're going to be in London for 2 weeks, and they don't have a bye next week. That's crazy." And I said, "Well, let's hope Jags win, Colts lose, and we can get Colts +7, because I would bang the Colts at that point." And then, of course, Jags win and the Colts win, and it opened 4.5. And I was like, oh my God. So it's clearly priced in. Like, I don't think you would get, this wouldn't be, this was 5.5 in week 1 in Indy. Obviously things have changed, Indy's power rated up, but still it's kind of interesting to see that dichotomy. And I think it's clear that this number would have been under, maybe 6 normally, but now that that factor is in here, it's probably down, a point and a half. Because of it, and so rightfully so. Again, I don't know how you quantify it, and the fact that historically teams, we saw Atlanta yesterday, teams without a bye off of London are essentially, I think they're 6-5 against the spread now. Like, it's kind of 50-50, but I think some of the, the market is pricing this in, already. To do it back-to-back weeks, I think is even more interesting, because, you're just probably happy to be back. And, guys who have families are like,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to be back after 2 weeks. And then it's the body clock adjusting back to U.S. time. I mean, I'm sure it's fine because you've got a full week to prepare. You're not flying back on Friday, right? Like the Bills flying into London, so you're not having to adjust. It might take a couple of days, but you're going to get adjusted eventually. So I don't know. It's one of those that we just don't have an answer for, but I think it's clearly already reflected in the marketplace because 4.5 is telling me that someone believes that it matters, and so it's just a point of how much, right? But it clearly, I think, is already priced in.
It
also, I think that.
Yeah, what were you saying, Suma?
Also, yeah, I want to say that Minshew and that Steichen offense also looks decent when he's on the field. Like the run game was working, like without the dual threat against a very good Titans run defense. They were moving the ball through the air at Houston. Against Tennessee. Ravens was a stinky weather game, but they were still somehow fine there. So I think market probably reacting to this is a decent or a very decently coached Colts team against a Jaguars team that is hurting a little bit and still is going through some growing pains offensively.
By the way, this is big for my. Sorry not to interrupt, George. I have to pat myself on the back here when I can. No, this is my Colts for my surprise team in the AFC, and I have a lot of Colts to win the AFC South tickets. So, and Shane Steichen, Coach of the Year tickets. So this is a big one for that regard. If they can get this victory here, I'm feeling good, especially with Gardner Minshew. I mean, that was another part of the handicap was even if Anthony Richardson wasn't ready to play or something happened to him, Gardner Minshew is as good as it gets from a backup perspective. I was perfectly fine, having him there. So that's why they got him. It was a great signing, and that's I think that's something that. Coaches are going to have to do here or teams are going to have to do going forward is finding a good backup to pair with a young running quarterback, because just injuries are going to happen with these guys. I mean, look at the Bears. They don't have one. They don't have anybody behind Justin Fields. So, he's it'll be, I'm glad that they got Minshew because I think it's clearly needed.
Yeah, there's that dynamic of if the starter goes down, where do we go with the line? Damian says Minshew, best backup in the league. Right? You don't knock them down too far. I know if you backed Carolina yesterday, you were hoping that we saw some Andy Dalton because he probably is an improvement to the point spread. Let's talk about Seahawks and Bengals, and we talked about Joe Burrow maybe turning the corner, but T. Higgins has the rib injury. That's something we're watching for. The last time we saw the Seahawks, Jamal Adams got concussed. Charles Cross has still not played yet. They lost the guard, Phil Haynes. They still were missing corners, Kobe Bryant, Trey Brown. Where do you see this line going? Like, is it going to hold under 2.5? Or do you think at some point, if we hear T. Higgins is in, we're probably going to get some over money and Cincy money? Suma?
If I had to bet right now, I would probably guess that we rather see a flat 3 than a two or 1.5. Seattle big names will be Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, both starting tackles. I think they also had some issues at guard before their bye week. Secondary, they were also without Kobe Bryant. Rick Ruin was back. Jamal Adams didn't finish the game at New York. So I think Seahawks have a chance. Draymond Jones was also banged up. I think they have a chance to enter this game extremely healthy, or like the healthiest they've been all season. T. Higgins, what bothers me is that they are going to have a bye week after that. So cracked ribs, very tough to play through. So there might be the thought process, let's get him into the bye, and he will be close to 100% after the bye. So remains to be seen. He had a limited practice on Friday, I guess, but I think for a wide receiver who really has to extend his body right into a arriving tackle, that's very tough to play 1 week after a broken rib. But we will see. Those are the kind of injuries. And then we talked about it. It depends on how the market is pricing the health status or the limitations of Joe Burrow right now.
Yeah, Cleve, any thoughts on this game early line?
I think Chidobe Awuzie is a big, getting him back would be big for Cincinnati against this wide receiving core. the Cam Taylor Britt is not, he and DJ Turner are, DJ Turner's a rookie. Cam Taylor Britt is that. You need against Metcalf and Lockett, you definitely need a Woozier back. So I think that's a big injury to take a look at. And obviously the Higgins, you're going to have to score with Seattle. So I think having as many weapons as possible. They're not going to, and they've got Tariq Woolen to at least shadow Jamar Chase. So you've got a corner, unlike Arizona doesn't have any, top level corners to at least, put someone legitimate on him. So, and the way the Weatherspoon played last week, I mean, that, you can you maybe not have to shadow. You could just kind of have one on each side and be okay. I'm interested to see how Weatherspoon continues after that game. And that was an awesome game he had, awesome performance. Awesome. I wonder, if he's a legit lockdown, top level type corner, I mean, pairing him with Woolen, that changes everything for Seattle, I think, because they just didn't have those reinforcements back there. To have both of those guys there, I think would just be gigantic and would really change things, in terms of kind of playoff prospects. So, because you could do so many different things, you could kind of keep those guys on an island and, blitz more and do other things to really help the rest of your defense. So I'm interested to see how that happens, what happens with that going forward. But I think Awuzie is the key here. I think that this is going to ping pong back and forth 3 to 2.5. I think there's reasons to back both sides. There's going to be plenty of people who are skeptical about the Burrow kind of comeback. And then plenty of people are going to say, no, he's back. and you're getting the good Bengals team under a field goal at home. And so, you're going to kind of get both sides of the coin. So I think it'll be interesting, kind of how that all plays out. But it'll definitely be kind of within these two numbers.
All right, let's talk 49ers Browns. This game, the total has been crashing, and I think part of that is the weather, but part of that is the, I guess, surprising news that Deshaun Watson wasn't throwing today. Cleve, you're the guy out of Cleveland. Were you surprised to see the report today that Watson isn't 100% ready to go, or do you think this is just precaution entering this week?
You would have thought after a full week off that, and especially after he thought he was going to play last Sunday, that he would be fine and ready to go. But yeah, it was, it was a little bit drizzly in the morning. And so the team was practicing outside and he ended up practicing inside. I don't know if that was weather related or what. I mean, reporters are not allowed inside, so they don't know what happened in there. He could have had a regular throwing session, was just kind of keeping away from the media. We just don't know. It sounded like Stefanski he wouldn't be quoted as saying optimistic to play this week. And I think he got a lot of heat, and the organization did last week for kind of hyping up that he could, they think he was going to play, and then he didn't end up playing. So I think they're trying to be very cautious from just a reporting standpoint. So I don't know. I mean, it's a little worrisome. It's a shoulder. It's not like it's an ankle, right? This is everything to a quarterback. And so, and it's his throwing shoulder. It's not his opposite shoulder, not like Baker Mayfield had a few years ago. So I would be concerned, especially when it's not even just that. I mean, San Francisco rightfully took money. The under rightfully took money. It's not just the shoulder. You got this hot Niners defense that's playing really well. You got a major mismatch with Bosa versus Jedrick Wills at the left side. It's the fact that it's supposed to be 50 degrees and windy and raining, and we've already seen Deshaun Watson is as affected as any quarterback as there is in bad weather. He's never played well in bad weather. He hasn't done so, off the wind off the lake. Cleveland, in the opener, if you got the same kind of weather as we did in that Cincinnati game, he couldn't complete a pass for the first half. So all those things are kind of reasons why this number continues to rise. I don't know. I mean, I don't see any way that it drops below 4. I think it's kind of in that 4 to 6 range here until we figure out for sure what's going to happen with Watson. But it's definitely going to be in this range. I mean, if Watson's out, this thing gets over a touchdown for sure. But even if he plays, I think it settles in that 4.5 range.
All right, Suma, I think Deshaun Watson figured out around the third quarter of last night's game that his shoulder still hurts. The 49ers are relatively healthy, but they did lose Aaron Banks, who had been playing well at guard. And we often talk about, Shanahan's scheme can work around limitations on the O-line, but this is a damn good D-line that the Niners are going to play against. Is there a version of this game where the Browns could really bring the heat defensively and get this into a knockout, drag-out fight?
I think they have the bodies to do so, but I'm not sure they will have the coverage ability over 60 minutes to really let Brock Purdy hold the ball, contain the run game, and like everything together. The Niners can beat you on so many levels. I mean, what was the most fascinating aspect about last night's game, in my opinion, is that usually when you try to double block a good pass rusher, like the Niners did with Micah Parsons, you do it with a tight end chip, you do it with a double team where a 6 offensive lineman stays in or a tight end stays in, but usually you will suffer a route in the route distribution. And the Niners used Kyle Juszczyk on a lot of these cut blocks against Micah Parsons, and it didn't really matter. Like, guys were running right open down the field. You could easily sacrifice your fullback to block the opposing's best pass rusher. They will likely find some wrinkles to do that with Myles Garrett. And yes, the Browns defense is extremely loaded up front, but I'm not sure they will be able to contain this juggernaut for 60 minutes. And I mean, if it's really going to be a rainy and windy game, a game where Deshaun Watson might not be perform to his usual standard, and they have to run the ball, I think it might really favor the 49ers to win in the trenches and get their run game going. But remains to be seen whether it's going to be Watson or the rookie. The rookie looked completely lost against the Ravens. Yeah.
All right, Suma, I was dumb enough to bet on the Panthers this past weekend. I thought, I love Brian Johnson, but I said, no Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't know that this Detroit offense is dynamic enough. What I forgot was the Panthers defense is not good this year, and they're getting torched on the ground. The Bucs defense, however, has been good. If Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't go for Detroit because he's dealing with some sort of ab or hernia, we don't know exactly what it is. Do you see Detroit's offense having success against this Bucs defense?
In some form or shape, yes, but I think it might be a tough game. I mean, it's a different game from playing against the Packers without Jair Alexander. Now the Panthers defense that ranked, I think, last in rush DVOA coming into the game. I think on the road against the Todd Bowles defense that's also getting healthier. I think Jamal Dean and Ryan Neal were practicing today. I think it's going to be a much tougher game for Detroit. We will see how they are going to handle this without ASB. And on the other side, I think Baker Mayfield and that Bucs offense, we gotta wait on Mike Evans. He was practicing individually to the side today, but Lions lost Emmanuel Mosley in his first game back. Also already without Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Brian Branch was out yesterday. That didn't really matter against Bryce Young, but it might matter a little bit more against Baker Mayfield and that offense. So injury situation might be favoring the Bucs in this one.
Cleve, you had 2 surprise picks in your preview this year. One was the Colts. We've already talked about their success. The other was the Bucs, and they're playing well. They're also coming off a bye. I trust your instincts on this. Do you think the Bucs are a good matchup against this Detroit Lions team?
It's an interesting matchup. I don't know if it's good or bad. The fact that you can at least get an extra week to help scheme for Ben Johnson's offense, can't hurt of all guys. But he's so creative that he comes up with plays, from a week-to-week basis. So, I'm not sure that that's going to matter all that much. I think it's an interesting game. I think it's going to be a competitive game. Looks like that the Lions are taking money. It's 3, and you're laying some juice here. So may get the 3.5, which will be interesting if that's the case. But I'm still not a total believer in this Lions defense. They're playing better. It's just that with all these injuries now, I mean, if Branch doesn't play and without Mosley, there are ways to attack them outside. And obviously we know that the Lions or the Bucs do have the receivers out there. And so, if everybody is healthy and ready to go, I think that, I think Tampa can score on them. I think, the total could be interesting here from a numbers standpoint. But I think it's gonna be a good game. I mean, Tampa's defense is solid, and they're just like a solid team. Like Baker Mayfield really struggles when he's getting harassed, and so if Detroit doesn't bring pressure, I mean, he can make plays, and so he can keep them in the game. And Jared Goff was good. He hasn't been great this season. He was good yesterday, but in general, like he hasn't been all that spectacular like he was last year. So I mean, I think there's ways to beat this team. I think it's gonna be interesting. Todd Bowles is a good DC, so he'll scheme ways. I should look because I haven't looked at, but I wonder how Todd Bowles does after a bye from a defensive standpoint. Not against the spread or anything, but just how he. These DCs that get extra time to prepare, I think do a really nice job typically. So, that could be the, advantage here for Tampa. And, you get these teams that depending on how hot it is in Tampa too, could be one of those things that a team that plays in a dome finally has to go outside and it's, kind of hot weather. I don't know. I haven't even checked what the temperature is, but that could be a factor too. So these little advantages that maybe Tampa gets playing at home and coming off a bye could give them a shot to win this game.
Yeah. Let's talk Eagles Jets. Jets were dealing with some injuries in their secondary. DJ Reed didn't play. Brendan Eccles didn't play. Then Elijah Vera Tucker, their best offensive lineman, got hurt, which things could get ugly in a hurry. Cleve, you liked Philadelphia against the Bucs. You liked Philadelphia against the Rams. Are you 3 for 3 here, or do you like Philadelphia?
Yeah, so full disclosure, my only bet so far has been the Eagles -6. I pounced on that 6. I just don't think it would. It's going to close 7, in my opinion. So I was willing to back Philly here. I haven't looked in the last hour where it's sitting. I'm guessing it's 6.5 or 7. But yeah, I think it's a horrible matchup for the Jets. Zach Wilson was fine, I guess, yesterday. But again, playing the worst defense in the NFL, and you're just fine. That doesn't really tell me much. Breece Hall was awesome. Breece Hall does Breece Hall things where he breaks off 70-yarders almost every week. But he's going up against an Eagles run defense that's top 5 in the NFL. So from that perspective, where you get the Jets is you can stop the run, so stop their only real legitimate offense, and you attack Zach Wilson in the pocket. And that offensive line was already bad, and they lose their best lineman, Vera Tucker. Dwayne Brown, who's their other tackle, he's out too. So I don't know who's going to play right and left tackle. I guess Becton's going to. I saw Becton got hurt too. I don't know if it was just a minor thing, but you got major issues going up against that Eagles front four. I mean, my God, Zach Wilson's going to be in for it. And yeah, the Jets defense is solid, but when your offense is going to score 10 to 14 points, all you got to do is get to 20 to really cover this game. I think that the Eagles will be fine. And the Broncos actually ran all over that Jets defense. There are some holes there. And, they had DJ Reed who was hurt, Brandon Eccles, they were down to their essentially their 4th and 5th corner. So I think you can attack this team. I think that if, the Jets got the win, but it wasn't really impressive to me. And, back to reality here. When, the fact that Kansas City closed over a touchdown and you get Philly under a touchdown in New York, not sure I totally understand that. I don't think the differences between Philly and KC are that big, especially to cut through the key number of 7. So I jumped on the 6. I think it closed at 7. We'll see.
Suma, can you make a case for your Jets? Are they going to need the help of the weather gods against Philadelphia this week?
Hard to make a case. I mean, just that matchup with the line of scrimmage, Jalen Carter is a monster, and sorry. Jets, like TA has said, they need to run the ball, and then they need Zach Wilson to not screw up, and it will be tough to run on that Eagles front. So maybe the Jets will call Mike Tomlin and get some of that voodoo magic.
All right, let's preview Monday Night Football. Green Bay Packers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Suma, I was excited to see the full Green Bay offense for the first time this year, and then we get the report this morning that Aaron Jones might not go. Devontae Adams is also, he's going to play even though he didn't practice 2 days, and then he was limited in the last day. Suma, what are you looking forward to in this game? How do you think the story of this game will play out?
I don't have a strong read on this game. I think what the Raiders want to do offensively is they want to run the ball and then try to distribute the ball to Jacoby Myers and Davante Adams. And I think if you can one-on-one defense, it's probably the Packers defense. They rank 29th in EPA per rush. They are giving up a close to 43.3% success rate on the ground. Jair Alexander, I think he's still questionable. I have not seen anything.
He should play. I saw today that he'll play. Yeah.
Okay, he should play. But still, I think that the Raiders, if there's a week they will cross 20 points for the first time, it might be against the Packers defense. On the other side, Raiders defense, like outside of Max Crosby, who can like disrupt any given play, there's not much to like about the defense map. So Elton Jenkins is back. Olan is a little bit healthier. Aaron Jones would be nice to have him in from a Packers point of view. Christian Watson was on a snap count against Detroit. I would expect a much larger snap share for him this week. I think there is something to gain against that Raiders defense, but yeah, long story. I don't have a strong read on either side. I think it could be a game where the last possession wins, but I would not be surprised if we saw some sort of a better or improved Raiders performance offensively, where they can run the ball and get something going against the Packers defense.
Cleve, there's going to be some growing pressure in the comments about who you like for a first touchdown score. Before I ask you that, I remember messaging you, and oftentimes the lines don't confuse me, and I was a little perplexed by how this line moved. Green Bay was as high as 2.5, and then it's been Raiders money shoving ever since. It reminded me of the Steelers line that flipped from Pittsburgh favorite to Las Vegas damn near 3 by a kickoff. Cleve, did the line movement confuse you? And do you have any angles on tonight's game?
No, I mean, I think the line move was purely a Jimmy Garoppolo, question whether he's going to play. Once I think it was Saturday, they said he was going to play. It kind of jumped. So I think it's purely that. And honestly, going from, -2, +2 kind of in between, it's not really that meaningful, you wouldn't think, although you never know. But, the kind of the value doesn't change all that much. I actually do I like the Packers this morning when I thought Aaron Jones was going to play. All accounts, it sounded like he was going to play. That hurt. But I think I like, but I'm on that anyway already. I do like the Raiders team total under 23.5 a bit more. And I just, first of all, you've got evidence that this Raiders offense just doesn't matter who they face. I mean, the Packers defense is below average without Jair Alexander. With Alexander, I mean, they're, call it league average to be fair. Like they could only put up 17 against the Broncos, the worst defense in the NFL. You could put up 18 against the Steelers defense. It's very beatable. They didn't do anything against Buffalo. Obviously last week against the Chargers was Aiden O'Connell, but they just really haven't impressed me all that much. And the fact that Davante Adams got a bum shoulder, I mean, he didn't practice at all. They said he's going to play, even though he hasn't practiced. If this was any other team than the Packers, I think he sits. He's gonna, but so like the guy's not gonna be able to lift his arm up, even if it's just a couple of plays that make the difference on third down. Like that's huge. So that I think all those things are really important in looking at this under. And look, this is not something that I'm rooting for, but I had a theory that these quarterbacks after concussions have struggled. It's just something that I recall. So I did some research this morning. And since 2021, there have been 8 quarterbacks coming off of a concussion. So they miss a game, or if it's the week of a concussion. And 1 in 7 against the spread with a -10 against the spread margin per game. They lost, 3 of them lost by double digits. The team totals went under in 6 of those 8 games. And if you look at some of the success rates, negative EPA, 45% success rate, all of the quarterbacks except for one, I think it was Stafford last year against the Saints, generated an EPA that was below their baseline average for the season. So they've all essentially underperformed except for Stafford for whatever it's worth. And so I just, it doesn't, take a rocket scientist to think that there is some negative effects after a concussion, whether it's just psychological, just not wanting to take hits, or if it's just, they're still a little bit foggy at times. Like there's something that goes on there. Maybe that's the teams are more conservative and they run the ball more. I don't know, whatever it is. There's a difference on the week back. So I think all of that kind of, for me, and these are two slow teams. I mean, Green Bay's bottom 5 in pace, neutral game pace. Even the Raiders are below average. The Raiders opponents actually run the ball over expected at one of the top 5 highest rates, because that's how Patrick Graham's defense is. It's kind of allows you to run and keeps everything underneath. So I think that the Packers are going to want to kind of take what's given to them, especially with a young quarterback on the road. So all those things, it's slower game. I think that the Adams injury, the post-concussion stuff, and the fact that Alexander's back kind of leads me to, I think, under 23.5 is a good number.
You don't have anything for the people who are tuning in for the wizard of first down touchdown? Do you have anything for the people, or will you have something later on if they check you on Twitter?
Yeah, check me out. I haven't even looked. I'm not going to lie. So usually these things come to me my midday. I do my extensive research for these darts that I have no control over. So just stay tuned, I guess. I mean, there's no way. I'm already banking on the fact I'm not going to hit another one the rest of the season. So, I mean, 3 at 20-1 or higher in the last month, I don't think that's possible. So we'll see. But just, I guess, tune back later this afternoon, and I'll send something out.
Guys, thank you for your time. I went an entire show without mentioning the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to wait till we're 5-1 next week to really get insufferable and ignorant. Thanks so much for doing this. We'll be back again tomorrow at 2:00 with myself and Sharp Clark to break down some film, recap this Monday nighter, and give you the first Thursday night preview. You don't want to miss it, so please subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and please like it. Before you go, if you watch the whole show, just hit the like button, and then you can close your browser window. We'll appreciate it. That's it for me. Thanks to Suma. Thanks to Cleve TA. Thanks to producer Jason. And thanks to you, the audience. Until next time.